Did you know that persons with disabilities who are on SSI pay a 50% tax on earnings if they dare go out and work? According to a working paper on evidence from administrative data, the total effective tax rate of the top 0.0002% of earners averaged paying only a 24% tax. How is that fair? I'm Annette Bourbonniere from Nothing Without Us, Stories and Discussions of Meaningful Inclusion. I am a 70-ish-year-old woman with dark-rimmed eyeglasses, and I'm wearing a red shirt and a green vest, and I'm sitting in a power wheelchair. Please take the time to free subscribe if you have not already done so. Give me a like and make some comments, and I do read all the comments. So we recently posted an episode on what we can do to fix our government as the largest minority in the US. We need to stay informed. We need to become well acquainted with our lawmakers, contacting them regularly about what we like and what we don't like, what we expect of them. We need to vote because that is our superpower. And we need to have an agenda. We addressed one item of this agenda, which is demanding integrity of our elected officials, of our judicial system, in our government, in that first episode. So the list of things that we talked about in that episode that I posted, it's not in a particular order by priority or anything else, but the next item on that list is taxes. While we talk about this, we should realize that taxes are not an isolated item. It relates to poverty and equity. So there's a lot to work on in this area. So the US has approximately 1,000 billionaires, leading the rest of the world and making the concentration of wealth staggering when you consider also the level of poverty in this country. Now, I'm going to do some numbers here, putting on my economist hat, but I'm going to try to keep it so that we're all on the same page. So there is a working paper published by the National Bureau of Economic Research in August of 2025, written by Balker, Saez, Yegan, and Zuckman. According to this paper, the top 400 of these billionaires had an average 24% effective tax rate in 2018 to 2020. Now, this was based on individual income relative to economic income. So that means their personal income can be offset in several ways. So one example of this can be accomplished by postponing taking income by not selling stocks in companies they own. So they have that economic income because of the companies they own, but they're not actually having personal individual income. So if you are very wealthy, there are a number of things that you can do to legally pay lower taxes. People on SSI, on the other hand, pay that effective 50% tax on earnings because they lose $1 in SSI benefits for every $2 they earn. So clearly we have an equity problem in this country because the poorest people are paying more than twice as much of their own income in taxes than the very rich people. So how big is the poverty problem, you might ask? Well, I have some answers here. So there was a 2025 survey by an organization called Debt.com, and it found that 69% of adults in this country live paycheck to paycheck. That's challenging. And according to Bankrate, another survey, only about 47% of Americans have sufficient access to funds to cover a $1,000 emergency. That's right. Less than half the adults in the US are able to cover a $1,000 emergency. That's pretty staggering. About 10, a little over 10.5% of the population in the US live in poverty. But that number increases to 24% of Americans with disabilities. You see where I'm going with this? So I'm going to devote a full episode, or at least one full episode, on what I call the poverty rule for people with disabilities in this country. But just from these numbers, you can see that we have a problem. In a country that leads the world in billionaires, we have a lot of people living in poverty. So I believe that, I know I was playing economist, had that hat on and threw a lot of numbers at you, but I believe it's important to get a feel for the extent of this problem. So when we relieve the orange-faced monster from his presidential duties, a little sarcasm, we need to have a plan that addresses taxes and equity and poverty. We are not a poor country. There's enough money, enough resources. There is plenty to go around. What we have is a lack of willingness to reduce poverty. There is a greed among the privileged few who fail to pay adequate wages or adequate taxes or to support health care and education. At the same time, this government has rules for people with disabilities to sustain, or I should say, enforce the poverty that we live in. That's what I refer to as the poverty rule. So this episode is about taxes. What can we do about taxes that will bring some equity to this country? So first, I believe that all billionaires should pay a one-time 50% tax on their wealth. Before anyone starts to worry that this is going to drive them into poverty, we need to remind ourselves that this wealth is not being used to create jobs or to improve the economy. It's not being circulated in the economy. Much of this money is stored in offshore accounts or otherwise hoarded. It is virtually impossible for them to spend even a fraction of it. Seriously. Mackenzie Scott, we know she is, she became one of the richest women in the world when she divorced Jeff Bezos. She committed to giving away most of her wealth to charity. And in the past 7 years since her divorce, she has donated $26 billion to charities, including $7.2 billion last year alone. Now, that $7.2 billion in that 1 year was more than Elon Musk, Larry Page, Larry Ellison, and her ex-husband, Jeff Bezos, have donated combined over their entire lives. Still, even after doing that, her current net worth is estimated to be between 28 and $33 billion. It didn't break her, and she's trying to give it away. So a one-time 50% tax on wealth is not going to hurt anyone. Believe me. What it can do is seed a universal free healthcare plan. It can eliminate student loan debt and provide free education for everyone and still make a dent in the national debt. After that one-time tax, we should reserve the right to repeat that if the need arises. But billionaires and multimillionaires should also pay the same income tax rate as those on SSI who are trying to extricate themselves from the poverty trap through work. Because those on SSI are paying twice as much a percentage of their earnings as the billionaires. There's a problem here. So the largest number of people on SSI are people with disabilities who have been forced into poverty, either because their ability to work is limited because of their disabilities, or that their disability-related costs are higher than what they can earn, or a combination of the two. In most states, if you earn over 2.5 times the federal poverty level, and trust me, that's not a big number, you can lose access to Medicaid, the only insurer that pays for most of the healthcare and disability-related costs we have. And that, could cost the person who goes $100 over that income limit can lose sometimes as much as $80,000 to $100,000 a year worth of life-saving benefits. So we're going to talk about this poverty rule in a future episode, but this is a real problem. So these two taxes are needed, the one-time wealth tax and then either an increase in the income tax rate for billionaires or a significant decrease in income tax rate for earnings and people in poverty. And studies have shown that making that change will create more wealth, grow our economy stronger and faster than before. That's a good idea. Let's put this money to work. Because we know that when people are spending money, the economy grows. At the same time, it will enable a greater degree of equity for people with low incomes, including, or especially, those of us with disabilities. This is not charity. This is providing opportunity. This is opening doors. This is allowing us to help the economy grow, because it's not just our earnings that make the economy grow, but it's our spending. So since 1 in 4 Americans are people with disabilities, reducing the barriers to opportunities for us will lead to better lives for all of us. So we should remember that countries that have the highest tax rates are overall the happiest countries in the world, because individuals, one, get more for their taxes, and two, and because of that, two, they have more disposable income. Those $1,000 emergencies that many of us cannot cover will cease to exist, and they won't cause the pain that they cause now. An unexpected illness will not cause us to be homeless. Everyone will benefit from a stronger economy. We do not lack the resources. This is not going to hurt anybody. This is not communism. It is sharing. We lack the will, and we have to change that mindset. If we have learned anything during the crisis of this administration, it is that it's time for this to happen. It really has to happen now. We need to make it go. This year is the year for the midterm elections. For Rhode Island, that means it's the year of all of our state legislators and senators, and the governor, secretary of state, treasurer, attorney general are all elected as well. If we want change, we need to inform all of them that they work for us. They are our employees. We need to tell them who we are and what we need to make life fair for us. We need elected officials who will listen to us, and we need to tell them what will work and that what will work for us will benefit the state as well. So let's make sure everyone who is running in the midterm and state elections knows something about disability, about the problems we face, about policies that need to be reinforced or changed. So in the spirit of the late Alice Wong and her associates, Greg Barrington and Andrew Polrang, let's keep Crip the Vote alive. Use that hashtag on social media to make our voices heard. So it is hashtag Crip the Vote. Okay. I will run a Crip the Vote sub-series on this podcast for everyone running in Rhode Island. and maybe Massachusetts if people request them, to come and talk about disability issues and policies. This includes those running for election or re-election in Congress, Senate, governor, legislature, local races, all of the ones that are running. So during the 2024 election, I had a pretty decent response to requesting participation from office holders and candidates. I hope for the same or better in 2026. I was really new then. So now, as listeners to Nothing Without Us, you can participate in this. Let me know, who do you want to hear from? What do you want them to know? What questions do you want answered? And you can let me know if you want to join me in that interview and information session. We can make it happen remotely or in person if they're meeting in person. So Nothing Without Us should be a place for many voices to be heard. While I think I'm pretty in touch with all the disability issues, I'm sure some of you will think of things that I do not. And if this is to be a lively community, then you need to have a seat at this table. So it's through empowering ourselves that we will be able to protect our rights. So let's do it. So tell me in the comments who you want to hear from, what questions you want asked or issues discussed. And if you want to join in this interview, let's make all of our voices heard. So thank you for listening. I'm Annette from Nothing Without Us. Please free subscribe to this podcast. You will have access to all the regular and important episodes, and you can also make comments, and I read them all, and it helps me if you give me likes, makes me feel good. Also, please tell your friends. I really want to see this. I've been doing this podcast for 2 years now, and I really need to see it grow, reach more people. Let's, have more people involved in conversation. So while basic subscriptions are free, there are benefits to paid memberships, including early access to some postings, special postings that are only available to paid members, and a monthly live episode to those on the activist tier. My goal is to make this a lively community where voices will be heard. Our first attempt at a live episode failed, but people with disabilities, we don't give up. Expect the first live episode to be this month. Stay tuned for the date and time. We will be offering 3 of these episodes free of charge for all subscribers, even free subscribers. After that, access will be available to those either on the activist tier or to people who purchase a ticket. But check out the live episodes for free in April, May, and June. Just free subscribe if you haven't already. You can now purchase memberships on an annual basis now instead of just on a monthly basis, and you can gift a membership to someone else. So tell your friends they can find this podcast at patreon.com/nothingwithoutus and on YouTube and Spotify. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. So until the next Nothing Without Us, I'm Annette.